Welcome to Fast Effect Double Speed Magic the Gathering. Here we have Green-White Stompy, piloted by Matt against Tyler on Ant. And Tyler's put in a ton of reps with Ant. I remember the early days of him playing this, and he has come a long way at this point, finishing in the money several times. And, it's a dangerous deck. It really puts the pressure on your opponent there, pondering and passing on a pair of Lion's Eye Diamonds. Now, Stompy kind of implies that we're going to be seeing Chalice of the Void. That's one of the main cards that people think of when they say Stompy. Originally, that was Dragon Stompy, which is a mono-red Chalice deck. Now the moniker just gets kind of thrown around into any aggro deck that also has Chalices. That leading out with Once Upon a Time. And the card's really versatile. It's late game, it's kind of an impulse. Early game, it is a incredible value for 0 mana, finding potentially a mana source that's really needed, or, the best threat, depending on what your opponent's looking to do. It's going to be an uphill battle here for Stompy. I mean, usually you want to be able to fight Ant on the stack with counter spells, or going after their hand, going after their mana base. Ideally, at least one front, if not multiple, in order to contain the deck, because, I mean, it can literally win on the first turn. So restricting the resources tends to be a necessary requirement. Otherwise, they can undo all of the hard work that you've done by just having a flurry of spells, which we might be seeing here. Lotus Petal being sacrificed. Now we've got a Storm Count coming out. And a Thoughtseize going to take a shot at Matt's hand, but most of those cards not likely to matter. We see the Stoneforge Mystic taken. And we've got a flurry of rituals. This is not looking good from Matt's side of the table. This is almost certainly going to be lethal. Infernal Tutor, and Tyler's actually hellbent at this point. Likely being ad nauseum, as I don't see any red mana. So he's going to flip cards off the top of his library. Ooh. We've got another Cabal Ritual. And that should do it. So he's got all of those rituals. Normally you need Lion's Eye Diamond to make Infernal work. Well, I shouldn't say normally. A big chunk of the time, Lion's Eye Diamond is the thing that allows you to get Hellbent for that Infernal Tutor. Of course, if you just play a bunch of your rituals and end up with no cards in hand except for the Infernal, that's a pretty easy win as well. Now, we saw Past in Flames getting flipped up from Tyler. That's the preferred line, as it's deterministic. However, it is also the one that can get disrupted by your opponent. So ad nauseum, kind of the thing that people fall in love with Ant. Ad nauseum Tendrils is kind of that's where the name comes from. When I play the deck, I tend to lean more towards utilizing that Past in Flames. If you can disrupt your opponent with a discard spell, make sure that they can't interact with some trick like Crop Rotation for Bojuka Bog, or a Fairy Macabre, or some unforeseen graveyard interaction. That Past in Flames will allow you to just replay everything from your graveyard and win for certain. For example, Infernal Tutor after a bunch of rituals for the Past in Flames, then play the Past in Flames, all the rituals, and the Tutor for Tendrils, and you're all set. However, ad nauseum, I mean, you could just flip over a bunch of things that don't help, or perhaps not finding enough mana to actually cast a Tendrils. So that's the challenge with the deck. Sometimes you will ad nauseum and lose. I saw that the other day, an ad nauseum from like 14 life and just scooping it up. Tyler mulling. Cabal Ritual is one of my favorite cards in the deck. It's actually why I don't like a lot of the Ruby Storm decks that were floating around. They were running a bunch of really weak rituals. So the current builds, I believe it's called the Epic Gamble, those builds are definitely significant improvements. Matt starting out with that Once Upon a Time. Will he find a Thalia? I mean, that's really what he's going to want. Not necessarily off of the Once Upon a Time, but, getting that in play makes a huge difference. It's probably the reason for the white splash. I mean, Stoneforge Mystic is nice and all, but ultimately, Thalia, Gaddock Teague, something that will stop. Oh, is this actually a Thalia? Looks like it is. And he's got a Caracas to protect it. Now, that's not entirely the right way to think about it. When you're playing Death and Taxes and you have an Aether Vial, your Caracases protect your Thalia. Because if your opponent does target it, you can bounce it with Caracas and then use Aether Vial to put your Thalia back in. However, in this type of situation, if that Thalia gets handled, bouncing it with Caracas and then replaying it on a later turn may just never come. You may just lose with the Thalia not being on board. Thoughtseize takes a look, sees not a lot of cards left for Matt. Solitude, another Thalia. She is legendary. Tyler's going to want to kill that during the end step. Basic lands out. The Ramunap Excavator allowing for some card advantage, but not going to be able to lock Tyler out of the game. A Wasteland lock, for example, as he's got access to his basics. Wasteland going after. Looked like Tyler was considering whether or not to respond. Now we've got an Umezawa's Jite and Chain of Vapor. Well, the shields are down. Dark Ritual. We've got 3 black and a Storm of 1. 5 black. This could be an ad nauseum here. I mean, any business spell is going to be brutal. Got an Empty the Warrens. How wide can this go? There is an Umezawa's Jite on board. He can potentially bounce that. So Past in Flames. All the rituals. No tutor. I mean, a tutor would have been lethal. Bouncing the Jite. And Thought Seizing it. Looks like making 16 goblins. Versus potentially 2 blockers. So that would be 14 and then 12 coming through. Jite would have complicated that math greatly, allowing for life gain and shooting down tokens. More bodies could have made this interesting, but this is looking no good. Matt's actually attacking. Of like another Ramunap Excavator and a Thalia. Yeah, I'm not seeing a reason for that attack. My first thought was going back to Vintage, thinking about, balance or something, looking for a reason to get rid of all of your creatures. But, you're not typically going to do that when you're facing down Empty the Warrens tokens. I have seen that with, like, Blightsteel Colossus. People blocking their opponent's single creature with a Blightsteel only to get balanced right out of the game. Those are some spectacular plays. Some bodies left behind here for Tyler. Everything turned sideways. I was going to take a little bit of damage. Looks like Crackback should be lethal. Bouncing Thalia, replaying her, and now everything's going to come across. Tyler's perhaps thinking about Solitude or some similar card. Nope, that is going to do it. No matter how Matt blocked there, that is a lethal swarm of goblins. as Ant gets past this green-white Stompy deck.